I still remember that night like it happened yesterday. The silence in my room was louder than thunder. My phone lay on the table, her name flashing again and again. Sana Hart. I used to smile every time I saw it, but that night, my hands trembled instead. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because 5 minutes earlier, my world had already shattered. Earlier that evening, I was hanging out with a friend, casually scrolling through social media, when I stumbled upon a story that froze my blood. It was her, my girlfriend of 3 years, laughing in someone else's arms. The caption read, "Finally he's mine, Heart." And the guy? Not a stranger, my closest friend, Adil. For a full minute, I just stared at the screen. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Sana, the girl who once said, "You're my everything." Adil, the guy who swore, "Bro, I'll never betray you." Both of them together. I remember my chest tightening. The air felt heavier. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just love breaking, it was trust collapsing. I didn't cry. Not that night. I just sat there. Empty, broken, and silent. They say heartbreaks make people weaker. For me, that night didn't weaken me. It changed me. The next morning, I acted normal. I went to work. I replied to texts. I even smiled at my coworkers. But deep down, something had flipped inside me. The same love that once made me gentle now burned as quiet rage. Sana texted me like nothing had happened. "Hey babe, sorry I couldn't call last night. Fell asleep." I stared at that message for a long time. Her lie was clean, smooth, practiced. That's when I decided I wouldn't confront her yet. No screaming, no drama, because revenge tastes best when it's slow, calm, and smart. So I replied with a smile emoji. "It's okay, I understand." And from that moment on, I started my act. She thought I was still the same caring guy, but inside, I was building a plan. That week, I started observing her, quietly, patiently. Her calls became shorter, her excuses longer. She avoided video calls. She stopped saying, "I love you." Everything was falling into place for her downfall. One evening, I invited her and Adil to a small get-together I was hosting. They both showed up, nervous, pretending to be innocent. Sana smiled awkwardly, while Adil couldn't even meet my eyes. "Hey, bro," he said, trying to sound casual. "Hey, man," I replied, forcing a grin. "Glad you could make it." I watched them the whole night. The way they avoided eye contact with each other in front of me, the way Sana flinched every time I touched her hand, it was almost funny. They thought they were hiding something from me, but I had already seen it all. That night, after everyone left, I stood at my window watching the city lights flicker below. I whispered to myself, "You both broke me, but soon I'll break the masks you wear." Because the truth, I wasn't planning to expose them with anger. I was going to destroy their lies with proof, and I'd make sure everyone saw who they really were. But I also knew something deeper. If I acted with rage, I'd only look like the fool. So I decided to do the opposite. I'd be calm, too calm, so calm that they'd never see what was coming. That was the night everything changed. The night I buried the old me, the one who loved blindly, who trusted easily, and from his ashes, a new version of me was born. Colder, smarter, sharper. I didn't want revenge just to hurt them. I wanted revenge that would make them remember me every single day. And as I looked in the mirror, I said quietly, "You wanted to play with my heart, Sana? Fine. But I'll make sure the game ends my way."
We were the kind of couple movies pretend to be about. People stopped to smile when we walked down the street, not because we tried to look perfect, but because we looked easy together. Sana had this laugh that came from the chest, loud and bright, the kind that made everyone around her soften. I remember how my chest felt the first time she slipped her hand into mine, like the world quietly rearranged itself so we fit. We met in the most ordinary way, a mutual friend's birthday, a crowded room, music I pretended to like. But when she smiled at me across the hum of talk and laughter, everything else melted. She was reckless in a gentle way, impulsive, sincere, the sort of person who'd steal fries from your plate and then apologize as if she'd robbed you of an heirloom. We moved fast, not because we wanted to, but because everything else felt slow without her. Weekends became mini adventures, old movie nights, low-key drives to no-name places, chai at 3 in the morning while we argued about absurd things and somehow found peace after. I loved the way she listened, like she was building what I said into some private architecture that only belonged to us. 3 years. People say that's nothing, others say it's a lifetime. For me, it was both. We planned trips, joked about living together, and she introduced me to her parents like they were already familiar faces. Adil, my friend since school, became like a brother in that time. He was always around, sometimes too present, but he had this easy laugh that fit into our circle like a missing puzzle piece. Those years weren't perfect. They never are. There were fights that bruised silence for days, nights I wished I'd said something different, and times lying awake wondering if I was enough. But forgiveness came easy then. We forgave and moved forward, or at least I thought we did. Somewhere along the way, I started trusting my life to her. Silly things at first, sharing passwords, leaving keys, sending silly selfies, then bigger things, plans, secrets, a future. You don't notice the weight of trust until someone takes it and tosses it aside like trash. Up until that image on my phone, I honestly believed she'd never do that. I believed Adil would never cross that line. What I didn't see were the small shifts, an offhanded comment, a late-night call she'd brush off, the way she'd check her reflection a little longer. I told myself it was nothing. I made excuses. Maybe I wanted to believe. Maybe I was afraid of being the guy who didn't trust the woman he loved. So we kept living the perfect life for everyone else. That's the thing about masks. When they're well made, even the person inside forgets what they look like without them. And while I thought we were building something real, someone else was quietly pulling at the threads. By the time the first real crack appeared, my chest was already brittle with small, unspoken things. I remembered the day she canceled our anniversary dinner with a text, "Can't make it, sorry babe." No voice call, no explanation. I forced myself to laugh it off and went alone. I checked in her messages out of a stupid, cold curiosity and found nothing. Still, the seed of doubt was planted. It's strange how quickly love can flip into suspicion. The thing that felt safe became the thing that kept me awake. But even as the smoke of doubt started to rise, I wasn't ready to believe fire lived within our home. We promised each other the future in small gestures, a shared umbrella in rain, 2 spoons left in the sink, a scratched coffee mug with both our initials written in shaky hearts. Those things mattered. They still matter to me. They made the loss harder, made the betrayal more precise, because they weren't just objects. They were proof that once we built small, honest things together. In those early days, I'd never imagined I would have to plan revenge. I'd never pictured a life where I would need to dismantle a picture-perfect past to make room for truth. I only know now that the perfect couple had a fragile core, and I was about to watch it crack.
People ask me, with a strange sort of empathy, how I missed the signs. They want a checklist, like betrayal comes with a receipt. But signs are small things. A text turned cold, a laugh that faded when you entered the room, the absence of good morning and good night as if they were tiny rituals your partner forgot to keep. Sana started carrying her phone like it was a secret. She kept it face down on the table. Once she walked out of the room to take a call and closed the door for the first time.
the way someone does when they don't want the conversation to bleed into the open. I noticed, then shrugged it away. I told myself people need privacy, that I was being insecure. Adil changed too. He was always a little too available, showing up when plans were vague, offering to hang out because he missed us. He started sending me memes he'd find awkward a month earlier. Smallness. Little intrusions into our everyday, like cracks widening by millimeters you only notice when light passes through. There were things that should have nudged me harder. Sana's sudden interest in fashion brands she'd never cared about before. The way she insisted on getting ready early, despite us watching the same morning shows together for years. The soft defensiveness when I asked, "Where are you?" and she answered with a joke. There were nights she said she was tired, washed her face, and suddenly the bed felt empty, even though she was beside me. I made lists in my head, things that could be explained, things that couldn't. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but the doubt nested like an animal, and the more I ignored it, the louder it growled. At work, I became distracted. I'd catch myself replaying small interactions as if they held secret meanings. Why did she like that post? Why did Ideal touch her shoulder like that? A man can become a detective in his own life, following tiny breadcrumbs that lead to an ugly clearing. Another warning came from mutual friends. Not direct accusations, just comments like, "They seem distant lately," or "Sana's been out a lot." I treated them politely, like people in love often do when they fear what the truth might do to them. The worst moment was when a waitress at a cafe recognized her and waved, then blushed and said, "You and him, right?" The way she said it, like she'd known them intimately, lodged in me like a splinter. I looked at Sana, who pretended not to notice. That afternoon, there was a gap, a space where our closeness used to be, and I felt the edge of it, like cold steel. If I could turn back time, I'd follow the small things. I would have asked harder questions. I would have asked with love and fear, not suspicion. But you cannot write a new past. You can only live the present and decide what to do with the truths it hands you. So I watched. I recorded names in my head. I let the small things become a pile of evidence that would later feel like a verdict.
Discovery never arrived with trumpets. It arrived with the soft tap of a social media notification and a caption that felt like a slap. I was scrolling on my couch, a late-night habit, when I saw her story. Funny, bright, a picture of Sana and Adil laughing, that easy closeness that used to be reserved for our private frames. The caption was simple, "Finally, he's mine." The words were a hammer. I read them over and over like a trying to beat a code. Adil tagged her. He tagged me too, because of course he did. A cold, deliberate move that made the betrayal publicly intimate, as if he wanted the world to see the fracture. I didn't break down. I didn't scream. For a long, stalled moment, nothing happened. My room hummed. The city made its indifferent noises. I put the phone down and looked at the ceiling. The ceiling didn't look different, but my past did. Everything we'd built suddenly seemed like a stage set. Painted smiles, props, rehearsed interactions. When anger hit, it wasn't the screaming kind. It was slow, a heavy fog of disappointment. I thought of our anniversary, the coffee mugs, the little notes she left in my wallet. Every one of them had a new weight. I thought of Adil's laugh and where he'd been when I needed a brother the most. And I felt something like a betrayal of not only love, but loyalty. I didn't confront them that night. I couldn't deliver a line I'd never practiced. I didn't want to make a scene. But I also didn't want their image of me to be weakness. So I did the thing most enemies do not expect. I acted calm. The next morning, I texted Sana, pretending innocence. I wrote, "You okay, babe?" Her reply was immediate.
Yeah, babe, just a party. We'll talk soon. That soon was a small poison. I kept my voice measured that week. I met Otto for a drink like everything was normal. He sat there with a fake casualness and a fake laugh. I watched him like a man watching someone handle a loaded gun. We all know confrontation is a primitive ritual. It calls for drama, for raised voices, for the soul to caveman roar its hurt. But I wanted more. I wanted their shame to be thorough, undeniable, and final. I wanted them to feel the slow collapse of trust that they'd inflicted on me, not just a moment of humiliation. So I started gathering small things, screenshots, dates, times, little things people leave behind when they don't expect another person to collect evidence like a hobby. Plans they mentioned in passing, flights he booked for work, messages timed when she was supposed to be asleep, all of it became a map of deception. People around noticed I was quieter. Sana complained I was distant, and I smiled and told her I was tired. She thought I was drifting. She had no idea I was collecting the puzzle pieces that would later become the picture she couldn't deny.
The days after discovery felt like walking on a floor that moves beneath you. You step, and the tiles shift. I was trying to act like the guy whose heart hadn't been broken, but it's a poor actor who can't hide shaky hands. People asked how I was. I told them I was okay. Friends hugged me in ways that made my jaw ache. Sana sent a message. "Can we please talk? I'm sorry." I read it and set it aside for hours, letting the words cool into something more useful than forgiveness. Pain is raw. Pride is hot. Together, they become a two-headed beast that alters reasoning. My pride said, "Don't beg." My pain said, "Don't forget." I decided to let pride steer. I wanted to be the one who chose the tone and tempo. No public theater, no begging on the pavement, just action. My first plan wasn't dramatic. It didn't require confrontations or loud scenes. It required patience and a careful gathering of the story's threads. I began to document everything. Screenshots of their posts, timestamps, chorus of friends' offhand remarks, digital breadcrumbs that betray secret meetings and long messages. Evidence, not rage. I also started to safeguard myself. Accounts changed, passwords updated. I moved money into a separate account and handled practical things no one tells you matter until it's too late. People romanticize revenge like some glorious battlefield. The real thing is tedious paperwork and small, strategic moves. You build a foundation for the moment when you'll finally speak. Emotionally, I grieved. I walked alone at night, replaying small scenes, bargaining with memories. I imagined different choices I should have made, words I should have said. I let myself cry in the shower where the steam hid the tracks. But I didn't collapse into destruction. I turned the pain into fuel. I also tested them. Little traps, polite nudges to see where they'd fall. A fake, "I'm going out" text to check who she was meeting. A casual request to a deal about plans. Listening for the stall in his voice. They were careless, and carelessness makes sloppiness. Sloppiness makes proof. Then came the moral crossroad. Revenge can be selfish and bitter, or it can be crafted to teach. I wanted the lesson to be sharp and convincing, not just mean. My aim was to expose truth, not ruin people senselessly. There's a line between justice and cruelty. I wanted to stay on the justice side. So I drafted the first real plan. Gather proof, make the truth public in a way that left them no room to paint me as unstable. I'd present facts, concrete, dated, undeniable. So if they tried to gaslight, the evidence would be louder than their words. It felt cold, writing lists and organizing files,
but that coldness was a refuge. It kept my decisions clear. I wouldn't let theater win. I'd let truth.
Revenge stories you hear are either fireworks or fairy tales. Mine was spreadsheets and soft emails. I made lists. I set small, achievable goals. I blocked dramatic, outsized gestures in favor of slow, undeniable dismantling. Step 1. Secure evidence. I gathered screenshots, timestamps, bank transfers, receipts, and social posts. I booked a private investigator, not to spy on their lives in some lurid way, but to corroborate dates and locations. Proof, when presented cleanly, is lethal to lies. Step 2. Protect myself legally. I consulted quietly, paid fees that felt like a small betrayal to my own bank account, and learned how to shield my name and reputation. I didn't want this to be a messy public slugfest that only made everyone look bad. I wanted clarity. Step 3. The social stage. People's hearts are swayed by narrative more than facts. If everyone sees the truth from the right angle, the shame lands where it should. I mapped who I wanted to tell, how, and when. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about restoring my dignity and making sure those close to us knew who we really were. Step 4. Timing. Good revenge needs timing, like good jokes need a pause. Reveal too soon, and it looks like hysteria. Reveal too late, and it looks like pettiness. I waited for the point where the evidence was undeniable and the emotional effect would be maximal. I also planned contingencies. What if a deal lied? What if Sana spun a story? I prepared statements, compiled files, and set up secure backups. The aim was not to humiliate with cruelty, but to close a chapter with the truth visible and indisputable. At the core of the plan was patience. That was the weapon I'd chosen. I stopped seeking quick answers or foolish confrontations. I used the time to grow sharper, more deliberate in my choices. I practiced calm in front of friends and family. They still saw the same man, only quieter. They didn't know the plan, and that was the point. There were nights I doubted. When you plan a new life on the ruins of an old one, there's an ache that feels like homesickness. I missed the man I used to be who trusted easily. But I learned to accept that the old man had been naive, and the new one had a purpose. I also learned to watch for human error. Betrayal is messy because people are messy. They lie and then they forget the lie. They plan and then get sloppy. That sloppiness would be my ally. I had to be ready to catch it and make it meaningful. My friends asked why I was doing this. My answer was simple. Not for revenge, but for truth. The right to say, to myself and to everyone who cared, that I would not be made a fool in silence, that dignity mattered. The plan was built on that idea, like a house built on rock, not sand.
The first act was tiny. A corrected photo here, a carefully timed message there. I revealed small pieces of truth to those who mattered. Parents of mutual friends, co-workers, the people who would notice and carry whispers. I was careful to avoid gossip mongering. Instead, I offered facts, calmly and clearly. I remember the first time someone who mattered looked at me with new understanding. A mutual friend said, "I had no idea." That short line was the first domino to fall. When a dozen dominoes line up, the final fall is inevitable. I used the language of proof, not accusation. When I spoke to Sana's sister, I showed details and dates. She listened, and then, slowly, her face changed. There was shock, then sadness, then a kind of protective anger I hadn't expected. The sister's words spread.
The more people who knew, the harder it was for Sana and Adil to maintain the pretense. Adil's world started to tilt. He lost opportunities because colleagues who'd heard the truth were wary. Sana found her social circle split. Not because I wanted to ruin them, but because their choices had consequences. There were personal moments that felt like small victories. A friend who used to invite all three of us started arranging separate plans. A group chat where they used to brag suddenly went quiet. The silence was satisfying. Not cruel, just fitting. They had chosen to betray, and the world around them adjusted. I won no applause. I didn't need it. The joys in this stage were quiet and private, like watching an artist finish a painting after months of careful strokes. Every person who learned the truth was a brushstroke. The picture was forming. But nothing is linear. With each small win came backlash. Rumors spun to make me look like the angry ex. People I thought would stand neutral started believing the artful narrative that love splits create. Some days felt like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I had to keep steady. The plan demanded restraint. When Sana reached out begging for privacy and healing, I listened and replied with measured answers. When Adil tried to gaslight me in front of friends, I kept my cool and later spoke privately to those whose opinions mattered. I let facts, not emotion, do the talking. It's surprising how effective calm can be. People expect drama. When you give them facts and a composed face, they often switch to you mentally. They admire restraint. They respect someone who doesn't explode but acts with precision. The execution phase also taught me about limits. There are things you cannot control. How someone feels, how much they change, or whether they'll truly understand the depth of what they've done. My job wasn't to change them. It was to show them the consequences of their choices, without descending into the kind of petty cruelty that stains your own hands. Some nights, I sat back and watched the city. I imagined the future and how this chapter would close. I didn't want revenge to define me forever. I wanted it to be a bridge to something cleaner. Peace, clarity, a new life where trust would be a choice, not a given.
There is a precise moment in every carefully built plan when all the small actions converge and create a new reality. For me, that moment arrived not with a shout, but with a series of short, sharp knocks on the door of inevitability. It began at a family gathering, one I'd organized quietly, inviting people who mattered, mutual friends, some of Sana's family, and a few colleagues. I told them I wanted an evening of catching up. The room was warm with cooking smells, soft laughter, a playlist that had become ours. Everyone arrived thinking it was just another night. That was the point. My reveal was not a spectacle. I played a video, short clips stitched together, time-stamped messages, photos taken from their public feeds with overlays of dates and times, voice notes that matched the days she said she was home. I narrated each piece calmly, like a man reading an affidavit. No screams, no dramatic pauses, just truth. At first, there was an awkward silence. Sana's face went pale. Adil's jaw clenched. People looked at their phones. Then the room filled with a different kind of noise, the whispered shock of people who realize they've been shown a new version of reality. Sana tried to speak. Her voice was thin. "You can't do this," she said. But the images were already there, clear and precise, and her words felt small against the weight of evidence. People who admired our relationship stared at her with pity and confusion. A few hugged me, a few left the room, not wanting to carry the heaviness. Adil's friend tried to defend him, but the facts started to crowd the defenses. He could argue, but numbers and dates are stubborn. The turning point wasn't humiliation so much as undeniable clarity. The room now saw what I'd been seeing.
The pattern of deception, the repeated lies. They didn't like what they saw, and neither did I, but there was relief in the finishing shape. After the video, Sana stormed out. A deal followed. I felt nothing like triumph. I felt something quieter. Closure. An ending. That night, messages flooded in. Some people were supportive, some suggested I was cruel. A few asked if I'd considered forgiveness. I had, but forgiveness requires willingness from both sides. Her willingness was absent. My reveal wasn't about punishment alone. It was about reclaiming my reality and preventing them from reshaping it with lies. The fallout was immediate. Invitations stopped, people chose sides, and most drifted away from the trio we once were. For me, the turning point marked the end of pretense. The truth was now public, and their options narrowed. For Sana, it was the beginning of a slow, complicated unraveling. For Adil, it meant the quiet erosion of his reputation. For me, it was a step towards rebuilding a life not built on half-truths and lies. I didn't bask in their pain, but I didn't deny the satisfaction of clarity either. Emotionally, I was raw. It takes energy to orchestrate a closure. The relief came with fatigue, the tired kind that lingers even after you sleep. But when I closed my eyes that night, there was a small comfort. The chapter had been closed on my terms.
Confrontation, when it finally arrives, is rarely cathartic in the clean way movies promise. It's messy. It's full of half words and sudden, awkward attempts at explanation. For me, it came later, after the truth had spread and the reality of choices settled like dust. Sana sent long messages at first, apologies woven with explanations, attempts to shift blame, pleas for privacy. I read them and then filed them away. Her family called, hurt and confused. She tried to meet me at a cafe once, hands shaking, voice breaking, eyes full of a contrite sorrow that I didn't know how to receive. She asked for forgiveness. She asked for understanding. Forgiveness is a gift you give when someone's remorse is honest and change is possible. What she offered felt more like regret for being caught than sorrow for what she did. Maybe I was being brutal in my judgment, but I'd auditioned for trust and got a cheap imitation. Adil reached out too, trying to rebuild bridges I hadn't been willing to cross. He spoke about mistakes, about one stupid lapse, as if hundreds of moments could be slotted under the umbrella of lapse. He wanted to return to the easy camaraderie we once had. I listened to his explanations, and all I could hear was an attempt to calm his conscience, not to make real amends. Consequences came in many forms. Professionally, Adil lost a promotion because people questioned his judgment. Socially, his circle thinned. Sana found that people who once smiled at her avoided eye contact. The very small cruelties of social circles can feel heavier than any formal punishment. She faced whispers in spaces where she used to be praised. I felt an odd, ambivalent sense of responsibility. Did I ruin 2 lives? Maybe, but they had already ruined one, mine. They made choices that created ripples affecting many people. The consequences were the natural echo of those choices. Punishment, I believed, should be a proportionate response. What surprised me most was how little pleasure I felt. Standing across from them in the cafe, seeing the smallness of their eyes and the forced sadness in their voices didn't bring the joy I'd imagined. It brought a strange emptiness. Revenge is not always sweet. Often it's a bittersweet, cold thing, like biting into a fruit that tastes of both sugar and bruises. I remember telling them plain and simple, you broke something. You made a choice. I wanted people to see the truth. They tried to explain, to barter for mercy. I didn't give it. Sometimes mercy comes, but not for people who won't prove they earned it. The climax for me wasn't a single dramatic showdown. It was the accumulation of consequences that shifted their world into a new shape. It was the moment when people stopped inviting them to casual lunches, when silence replaced cheers,
when their image tarnished in ways that truth makes possible. And yet, even in that, there was a strange lesson. People often think revenge fills an emptiness. It doesn't. It clears space so something new can grow, if you let it. My job after the climax was not to stand on ruins, but to build beside them, away from them.
After the dust settled, life did something it always does. It moved forward. Some mornings were heavy with memory, and some evenings felt clean. The people who mattered stayed. Those who didn't drifted away. In the quiet that followed, I had time to reflect on what I'd done and why. The first practical lesson I learned was this: dignity is earned and guarded. When you give trust, give it with your eyes open. That doesn't mean becoming paranoid or bitter. It means being wise. Trust the person who earns it daily, not the one who promises it verbally in big, shiny speeches. The second lesson: revenge, when turned into justice, can be constructive. My aim wasn't to destroy, but to correct a false narrative. I wanted truth to be visible so people could choose with clarity. If that feels harsh, remember, betrayal shatters. Repair requires truth. But the most important thing I learned is about forgiveness. Not the one people shout as a badge of honor, but the quiet kind that frees you from bitterness. Forgiveness for me didn't mean letting them back into my life. It meant accepting the wound and not letting it become my identity. I forgave because I wanted to live a life that wasn't defined by what they'd taken. A moral sits at the edge of stories like this, and mine is simple. Love is brave, but trust should be wise. People you love can hurt you, and sometimes they will. When that happens, choose a response that preserves your dignity and teaches a lesson without stooping to cruelty. I also learned to rebuild. I made new plans, small at first. Coffee with friends who had shown up. A short trip alone to a place I'd always wanted to see. I took up reading again, books that made me think rather than spiral. I dated tentatively, like a man who had learned the grammar of hearts and was cautious about composing sentences. There were nights when I still felt anger flare like a forgotten ember. That's human. It's okay to feel. But I refused to act from that ember. Revenge had a place. It was a chapter, not a lifestyle. After the storm, I wanted sun. Finally, I learned that people are complicated. Santa was not a villain written in black ink. She was flawed, human, selfish in certain moments. Adil was not purely evil. He was a man who made a catastrophic error. Understanding this doesn't excuse their choices. It only helps you let go of the corrosive fantasy that revenge will turn complicated people into simple caricatures. If there's one message I want anyone listening to take away, it's this: respect yourself enough to set boundaries and demand honesty, but forgive in a way that frees you, not in a way that invites the same pain back into your life. When I look back now, months later, I don't feel like a hero. I feel like a man who chose to not disappear quietly under a lie. I reclaimed my story. I learned the painful currency of trust, and I spent it wisely afterward. The end of a painful chapter isn't an end to life. It's a chance to write the next one. And in that next chapter, I vowed to love better, to trust wiser, and to hold my dignity like a small, stubborn flame that would keep me warm in future storms.